The other mechanism for connecting to VNets in Azure is what's called a VNet to VNet connection. A VNet to VNet connection is like a VPN connection between two Azure VNets. It's similar to a VPN you might set up between on-prem network and a VNet in Azure. The data is passed through an encrypted tunnel. You can see in the example shown here, test VNet 1 and test VNet 4 are connected over a VNet to VNet connection. Each one requires what's called a VPN gateway, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then the connection between them is this IPsec tunnel, which provides the encryption for passing the data. When you set up a VPN gateway, you choose a type. If its type is VPN, this connection is made over the public internet. If you choose a type of express route, it uses a private connection. So you lease a line from an internet service provider in your region or area, and you can have a private connection to the remote VNet. The cost of a VPN connection is a fixed hourly rate based on a SKU that you choose, which is your service tier. And then there's additional cost if the data is passing across regions. So in our example here, East US, West US, these two VNets are in different regions, so there would be additional cost for inter-region egress. So that's data that leaves one region and goes to the other. To set up a VNet to VNet connection, first establish your VNets and subnets in one or two regions. Next step, add a gateway subnet to each VNet. So you must have a subnet called gateway subnet on a VNet where you're going to have a VPN gateway connection. The net ID must be /29 or smaller. /27 is recommended because that just gives more IPs in this subnet that can be used for growth of your VNet connections. You next create another resource in Azure called a virtual network gateway. You create one in each region. So that's pictured here, the VPN gateway that's shown in each VNet. You can choose a type, VPN type or express route type. Choose a SKU. The high-end SKU is up to 10 gigabits per second. Just depends on the expected bandwidth you need for your connection. You'll also need a public IP address for each VPN gateway, because each gateway has to travel over the internet to send the traffic to the other gateway, so it needs an IP address on the other side to communicate with. Last, you create what's called a connection in each VPN gateway. That's where you specify the shared key. That shared key is used to encrypt all the data that passes through your tunnel. So let's look at how to set up a VNet to VNet connection in Azure. To set up a VNet to VNet connection, you need two VNets. They can be in the same region or different regions. You can see here I have two VNets, VNet East in East US, VNet West in West US 2. You should ensure that the address space for these VNets do not overlap, so that when you connect them, they're separate IP address spaces. You can see here for VNet East, I have an address space of 10.0 for the net ID. There also must be a subnet called Gateway Subnet. You can create that on the subnets blade by clicking Gateway Subnet and specifying a subnet address range. The net ID here, the size of the net ID must be 27 bits or less. So 24 is fine. This takes a few moments to add that subnet. You can see now I have two subnets. If I look at VNet West, I've already created a gateway subnet here. At this point, I'm ready to create the VPN gateways. For that, I'll go to the Azure Marketplace, search for Virtual Network Gateway, and click Create. To create one, you fill out this screen. You don't pick a resource group here because it will be the same resource group as the VNet that you choose. So we're going to call this the East Gateway. I'll start with East US. And you see as soon as I choose a VNet here, VNet East, now East RG is selected for me. So you choose the gateway type. I'm going to use VPN. That's the less expensive. Express route, more expensive, is more like a leased line connection. Route-based VPN type, pick a SKU. This affects your bandwidth and cost. I'm just going to choose the lowest cost, but you should review documentation to know what the ranges are here. Sometimes that changes over time. For basic and gateway 1, generation 1 is the only choice here, so that's fine. It's found my gateway subnet. I'll create a new IP address. This is for connecting inbound to the gateway or to the virtual network that I'm going to establish connection to. Active-active is a choice at some of the higher SKUs that allows you to have a failover connection, and you can configure border gateway protocol if you like. I'll just review and create. Setting up a gateway can take several minutes. I'll pause the video and come back when it's finished. And also, the same process needs to be performed on the other side. So I would need to go to VNet West and set up a virtual network gateway so that there's one existing on each VNet, and then we will connect the two. Okay, my VPN gateways are finished. East Gateway took about 30 minutes to create. West Gateway took almost 45 minutes, and that's pretty typical. So the VPN gateways are used to forward traffic from the local VNet to a remote VNet. In order to complete that, we need to set up the connection between the two gateways. So I'll go to East Gateway and go to the Connections blade and click Add. So I'll call this East to West. It's a VNet to VNet type. The first gateway is my local VNet. The second gateway is any other VNet in Azure that has a VPN gateway set up. I need a shared key. This essentially is the password that's used to encrypt the data. It should be something strong, not simple and short like this, but you'll need it on the other side when you configure the inbound traffic. You could turn on Azure private IP address, or you could use the public that we set up. IKv2 sounds fine. Resource group East RG, and set up the connection. So that would establish communication from East Gateway to West. And the same process is done on the West side. You can already see that has been set up. The status is still unknown. It's being established. We'll call this West to East. The source gateway is West. Target gateway is East. Need the same key. And click OK. So this is the last step in establishing the VNet to VNet connection. And at this point, traffic can travel in both directions across the gateways, essentially making a joined IP address space between VNet East and VNet West. In this lesson, we have looked at how to set up VNet peering and also VNet to VNet connections in Azure. For your exam, you should review how to implement both of these and some of the features of each.